She deserves to know the truth. The Mafia boss was all smiles, until the black waitress spoke up. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. It was a night like any other at one of New York's finest Italian restaurants. The chandeliers above glowed softly, casting a golden hue across the elegantly set tables. Waiters moved gracefully, serving plates of exquisite pasta, while the clinking of fine glassware filled the air. At the back of the restaurant, hidden from the public eye, a powerful figure sat, surrounded by his closest associates. Dante Romano, the Mafia boss, known for his ruthlessness and unshakable control over the city's criminal underworld, had just arrived for a private dinner with his fiancée and a couple of business partners. His sharp jawline, dark hair, and cold, calculating eyes made him the epitome of power. Tonight, however, things would take a turn. For a waitress named Tasha, it was another night of serving the city's elite. She had worked at this upscale establishment for 2 years, and though her position was one of service, her intelligence was sharp, and she had always noticed things that others didn't. She could read people like books and had a knack for catching small details that others might overlook. As she moved between the tables, her eyes couldn't help but glance toward the man everyone whispered about, Dante Romano. His presence was intimidating, yet Tasha couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about tonight. It wasn't just the usual power that radiated from him. No, it was something more. A subtle tension in the air, a feeling that something was about to happen. Her thoughts were interrupted when she reached table 7, where Dante Romano and his fiancée were seated. He was smiling, talking softly with his guests, but his gaze seemed to linger longer on her than it should have. His dark eyes locked onto hers for a brief moment, a silent acknowledgement that made her skin crawl. As she poured their wine, her hand trembled just slightly, but she quickly masked it with a polite smile. It wasn't the first time a powerful man had looked at her like that, but this time, it felt different. As she moved to walk away, she caught the fiancé's eyes. There was something calculating about the way she smiled, something that sent a chill down Tasha's spine. The evening progressed uneventfully, or so it seemed. Tasha continued to serve, her mind alert, always observing. But as the night wore on, the tension in the air only grew. She couldn't explain it, but something told her this dinner wasn't just about business. It was a setup, and she was part of it. When she returned to the table to refill Dante's glass, she noticed something odd in the contract documents that lay before him. A signature, a clause, something that didn't sit right with her. It was a trap, a legal loophole so well hidden that most people would never notice. But Tasha did, and that's when it hit her. She had to speak up. With the wine bottle in her hand, she hesitated for a moment. This was not her place. She was just a waitress, a servant. But what if this small action, this one moment, could change everything? She took a deep breath and approached the table once more, her heart racing. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, her voice steady but firm. Dante looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes?" he asked, his tone still calm, but with a hint of curiosity. Tasha's hands clenched the wine bottle, but she didn't flinch. "This clause," she said, pointing to the document on the table, "is a trap. If you sign this, you'll be giving away everything." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the room seemed to freeze. The guests fell silent, all eyes on Tasha. Dante's smile faded, replaced by an unreadable expression as he studied her. There was no anger, no immediate reaction, just a cold, calculating silence. And then, for the first time that evening, something in his demeanor changed. The power he exuded shifted, and Tasha could see a flicker of respect, maybe even admiration, in his eyes. The tension that had been building in the air all night finally snapped, and the room waited with bated breath for what would happen next. As the words hung in the air, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Tasha stood there, wine bottle in hand, her heart pounding in her chest as the Mafia boss, Dante Romano, slowly stared at her. His dark eyes narrowed, his gaze never wavering from hers. For a moment, no one moved, as though time itself had frozen. The room felt colder, the warmth from the chandeliers above doing little to ease the tension. Dante leaned back in his chair, his arms folding across his chest, his face unreadable. He said nothing, only stared at the legal papers on the table where Tasha had pointed. His silence was deafening, and it left Tasha wondering if she had overstepped. After what seemed like an eternity, he spoke, his voice low, measured. "You're sure?" His question was simple, but it carried an edge of curiosity. Tasha's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined herself in this position, standing before one of the most powerful men in New York, offering unsolicited advice, especially not about a man like him. The weight of his gaze was like a physical presence, one that could either crush her or leave her feeling unexpectedly powerful. "Yes," she replied, trying to steady her nerves. "I'm sure. This clause, it's designed to trap you. The way it's written, it gives away too much, makes you vulnerable in ways you might not realize." She took a step back, glancing briefly at the other diners who were watching the scene unfold. She could feel their eyes on her, but she refused to be intimidated. She had already crossed the line. She wasn't going to back down now. Dante didn't respond right away. He looked down at the contract, his finger tracing the line where Tasha had pointed. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the clinking glasses and murmurs from other tables. Then, with a soft exhale, he turned to the man seated next to him, his voice barely above a whisper. "Take a look at this," he said. The man, a close associate of Dante's, took the papers, his brow furrowing as he read. Tasha watched as he scanned the document, his expression changing from indifference to concern. Finally, the man looked up, his face tight. "She's right, boss. This could be bad for you. We missed this when we first reviewed it." Dante's eyes flicked to Tasha once again, this time with a hint of something new in his gaze. Was it respect? Or was it something more, something darker? He didn't say anything at first, but his posture softened just slightly, as if he was contemplating something. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he set the contract down on the table and looked at Tasha. "You've just saved me a lot of trouble," he said, his voice quiet, but the words carrying weight. Tasha blinked, not quite processing what he was saying. She had expected him to dismiss her, maybe even show some irritation at her interference. But instead, he was acknowledging her, in front of everyone. She wasn't sure how to respond, so she simply nodded, her throat suddenly dry. Dante leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense, but this time, there was something softer there, something that made her feel seen, like he was looking at her not just as a waitress, but as someone who had just done something significant. "You're not just some ordinary server, are you?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost contemplative. "What's your name?" Tasha felt a surge of nerves. This was it, the moment where everything could change. She had been invisible her entire life, blending into the background, doing her job, and never asking for more. But now, standing before Dante Romano, everything was different. "Tasha," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was still racing. "Tasha," Dante repeated, as if tasting the name, committing it to memory. "You've got a sharp mind. We could use someone like you." Tasha's eyes widened. She had expected him to ignore her, maybe even reprimand her. But this was something else. Something she hadn't prepared for. He was offering her something. What it was, she wasn't sure yet. But the words he had just spoken sent a ripple of unease through her. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. She had never imagined being in a position like this, standing before the Mafia boss of New York, being noticed for something other than her service. But this wasn't just about a legal clause or a chance to impress him. No, it was much bigger than that. In this moment, Tasha realized she had just set off a chain of events that could change everything, for both her and Dante Romano. What he did next would decide her fate, and she knew it. "I want you to stay," Dante said, breaking the silence. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Tasha's pulse quickened. "Stay?" she asked, barely able to believe what she was hearing. Dante nodded slowly. "Yes, I want you to stay here, with us. Keep your eyes open. There's more to this world than you realize, Tasha. More than just serving tables." Tasha stood there, speechless. She had no idea where this was leading, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even begin to comprehend. The following evening, Tasha found herself back at the restaurant, but everything felt different. She moved through the tables with the same practiced grace, But now, her mind was constantly racing. What had happened the night before? What had Dante meant when he said he wanted her to stay? She couldn't stop thinking about it. The way his dark eyes had looked at her, the respect in his gaze. It was like a door had been opened, and she wasn't sure whether she was stepping into something dangerous or something that could change her life forever. She had always kept her distance from people like him, the powerful, untouchable elite who controlled everything from the shadows. But now, she had caught his attention, and that wasn't something she could easily ignore. As the night wore on, the restaurant buzzed with its usual energy. The staff moved with practiced precision, serving food, refilling drinks, and keeping the place running smoothly. Tasha knew her job well, but now it felt like she was just going through the motions. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Dante and the offer he had made. She had never expected anything like it. But what did it mean? Did he really want her to join his world? Or was this some kind of test, a game for him to play? She didn't know, but she couldn't deny that the thought of what could come next was both thrilling and terrifying. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out quickly, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the message. It was from Dante. "Meet me after your shift. I have something to discuss with you." Tasha felt a wave of nerves wash over her. This was it. The moment she had been waiting for and dreading. What could he possibly want to talk about? She glanced around the restaurant. The night was far from over, and she still had a shift to finish. But the thought of facing Dante again, of whatever conversation was waiting for her, was enough to make her stomach turn. After what seemed like hours, Tasha finally clocked out. She grabbed her coat from the staff room and stepped into the cool night air. The streets of Manhattan were alive with activity, the neon lights of nearby bars and shops flashing brightly in the darkness. It was a sharp contrast to the quiet, almost ominous feeling that settled over her as she made her way to the car Dante had sent for her. The black sedan was parked at the curb, the driver standing by the door, waiting for her. He didn't speak as she climbed into the back seat, and the car pulled away from the restaurant without a word. The drive was silent, the city passing by in a blur. Tasha's mind raced, wondering what Dante was going to say. She had never imagined that a simple night of serving dinner would lead her here, to a meeting with a man who could destroy or elevate her with a single decision. The car finally came to a stop in front of a building she didn't recognize. It was a sleek, modern building, its glass facade reflecting the city lights. Tasha's heart pounded as she stepped out of the car, following the driver into the building. The lobby was empty, save for a few guards standing near the elevators. They didn't even glance at her as she passed, their eyes trained forward, as if they were used to people like her coming and going. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside. The driver pressed the button for the top floor, and the elevator began its ascent. Tasha's palms were sweaty as she gripped the railing, her thoughts spinning. She didn't know what she was walking into, but she knew it wasn't going to be anything like the life she had known before. When the elevator doors opened, she was greeted by the same cold, sterile atmosphere that had marked her last encounter with Dante. This was his world, cold, calculated, and powerful. But there was something different about it now. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was part of it, whether she liked it or not. Dante was waiting for her in a large office, the windows behind him offering a stunning view of the city. He didn't look up as she entered, his attention fixed on the documents spread out before him. Tasha hesitated for a moment before stepping into the room, her nerves on edge. Dante finally looked up, a slow smile spreading across his face as he stood to greet her. "Tasha," he said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "I'm glad you could make it." His tone was warm, but there was still an edge to it, something that reminded her of the dangerous man she had seen the night before. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Tasha sat down, her heart racing. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, his eyes studying her, as if he were trying to figure out what she was thinking. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," Dante continued, his voice low. "You were right about the contract. And for that, I owe you a debt." Tasha felt a wave of unease wash over her. What did that mean? What kind of debt was he talking about? Dante leaned forward slightly, his gaze intensifying. "I want to make you an offer, Tasha. You've shown that you have more than just the ability to serve drinks. You've got something I need. Something that can help me." He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. Tasha wasn't sure what to say. She had no idea where this conversation was going, but it was clear that Dante wasn't talking about just business anymore. "I want you to come work for me," he said, his voice steady. "Not as a waitress. Not as someone just cleaning tables. But as someone who can think for herself. Someone who can help me take things to the next level." Tasha's breath caught in her throat. This was the moment. This was the decision that would change everything. She had no idea what working for a man like Dante entailed, but she couldn't deny the pull. She couldn't deny the power and the promise of something more. The question was, did she want to take that leap? Would she be able to live with the consequences of that choice? The room was silent except for the soft hum of the city outside. Tasha sat across from Dante, her mind racing with the weight of the decision he had just put before her. He had asked her to work for him, not as a waitress, but as someone with a purpose, someone with a mind. His offer echoed in her mind, and the uncertainty inside her began to settle like a storm in her chest. She had never been someone who made decisions lightly, but the promise of something more, something beyond the life she had known, was hard to ignore. Dante studied her, his dark eyes never leaving her face. There was a certain expectation in his gaze, like he was waiting for her to say something, anything, to make the next move. Tasha could feel the weight of his stare, a pressure that seemed to grow stronger with each passing second. She wanted to speak, to ask what exactly he meant by helping him, but the words felt stuck in her throat. Dante leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the edge of the desk. "I know this is a big decision," he said, his voice calm and measured. "You've been doing the right thing your whole life. Serving others, keeping your head down, not asking for more. But I've seen something in you, Tasha. You have the ability to see things that others miss. That's what I need. Someone who can think for themselves, who isn't afraid to question things. Someone who can help me run this empire." Tasha shifted in her seat, her eyes dropping to her hands. She had always been just a small part of something bigger, a cog in the machine, and the idea of being more than that was both exhilarating and terrifying. She had always dreamed of something better for herself, but this was a world she had never imagined entering. "What exactly would I be doing?" she finally asked, her voice steady, but with a trace of uncertainty. Dante smiled, a small, knowing smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You'll be helping me with the things that others can't see. The things that need to be done quietly, out of sight. You'll be my eyes and ears, Tasha. And when the time comes, you'll make decisions that could change everything." Tasha felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard rumors about Dante, the things he did to keep control, the lengths he would go to protect his empire. She had never wanted to be a part of that world, but now it seemed like it was all she could think about. She had never imagined she would be sitting in a room with the Mafia boss of New York, discussing a future she couldn't even begin to comprehend. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante's eyes softened, just a little. "Because you're smart. You don't just do your job, you understand the bigger picture. Most people can't see beyond their own lives, but you," he paused, his gaze narrowing. "You're different." Tasha swallowed hard. She had no idea what to say to that. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She was just a waitress, a woman who worked hard to make ends meet. But Dante saw something in her. Something she wasn't sure she even saw in herself. "I know it's a lot to take in," Dante continued, "but think about it. This could be your chance to change everything. No more waiting tables. No more living paycheck to paycheck. You'll be part of something bigger than yourself. You'll have power, Tasha. And power can change the world." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Power. It was a word that had always seemed so distant, something only the wealthy and influential could touch. But now, it was right in front of her, offering her a way into a world she had never dreamed of. Tasha was silent for a long moment, her thoughts swirling. She didn't know if she was ready for this, if she even wanted it. But part of her knew this was a decision she couldn't take lightly. This was her chance to do something different, to step out of the shadows and into a world of power and influence. "I need some time," she said finally, her voice steady but uncertain. "To think about it." Dante nodded slowly, as if he had expected her response. "Take all the time you need," he said. "But remember, opportunities like this don't come around often. When you're ready, I'll be here." He stood up, and for a moment, Tasha thought he was going to say something more. But instead, he simply walked over to the window and looked out at the city below. The lights of Manhattan stretched out in front of them, a sea of possibilities. Tasha stood up as well, her mind still spinning. She had no idea what her next step would be, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she was on the verge of something important, something that could change everything. As she walked toward the door, Dante turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Don't take too long, Tasha," he said, his voice low. "The clock's ticking." The words echoed in her mind as she left the room. The weight of the decision still hung over her, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life was about to change, and there was no going back. The days following her conversation with Dante were a blur. Tasha went through the motions at work, her mind constantly drifting back to the offer he had made. She found it hard to focus on anything else, the weight of his words lingering in her thoughts. Power. Opportunity. A chance to change everything. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that this wasn't just about a new job. It was about stepping into a world that had always felt so far out of reach. Dante had given her a glimpse of something she had never imagined, something that made her question everything she had known. It wasn't just about the money or the prestige, it was about the kind of life she could have, the kind of power she could wield. But the more she thought about it, the more conflicted she became. Could she really walk into this world, knowing what it was built on? Could she accept the consequences of aligning herself with someone like Dante Romano? Her thoughts were interrupted when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, seeing Dante's name flashing. It had been 3 days since their meeting, and he had given her the time she had asked for. She had been thinking about his offer nonstop, but now, it was time to make a decision. She answered the phone, her heart pounding in her chest. "Tasha," Dante's voice came through, calm and steady, but with an edge. "Have you made up your mind?" She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment. "I think I have," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Dante paused for a moment, as if weighing her response. "Good," he said. "Meet me at the office in an hour. We'll talk more then." Tasha felt her stomach drop. The time had come. She hung up the phone and stood there for a moment, staring at the screen. There was no turning back now. The decision had been made. She grabbed her coat, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts, and made her way to the office where Dante had arranged to meet her. The building was the same as before, sleek, modern, intimidating. She couldn't help but feel small as she entered the lobby, the guards standing like silent sentinels at attention. She took the elevator up to the top floor, her palms sweaty as the doors opened. Dante was waiting for her, standing by the window, looking out over the city. He didn't turn around as she entered, but she could feel his presence in the room, powerful and commanding. "Come in," he said without turning. "I'm glad you've decided." Tasha stepped inside, her heart beating faster with each step. "I've thought about it," she said, her voice calm. "And I'm ready." Dante turned to face her, his eyes dark and unreadable. For a moment, he just stared at her, as if assessing her every word. "You understand what this means, right?" he asked, his voice low. Tasha nodded. "I do." There was no turning back now. "Good," Dante said, a small smile creeping across his face. "Then it's time to show you what you've really gotten yourself into." He motioned for her to follow him, and they walked through a set of heavy doors into a conference room. It was stark, minimalist, but there was a certain coldness to the space that made it feel more like a battlefield than a place for business. On the table were several folders, each one marked with different names: clients, associates, deals. "This is where it all happens," Dante said, his voice taking on a new tone, one that was both serious and intense. "This is where the decisions are made. The things that affect not just us, but everyone in this city. I didn't build this empire by playing nice, Tasha. I built it by doing what needed to be done." Tasha nodded, her eyes scanning the papers. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with anticipation. Dante looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "I need you to help me navigate the things that others won't touch. The contracts, the people, the business dealings that are too risky for most. You've got the mind for it. And I need someone who isn't afraid to speak up, to think outside the box." Tasha felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard rumors, of course, about the things Dante had done, the people who had fallen because of his decisions. But this wasn't a fairy tale. This was the reality of the world she was stepping into. And for the first time, she realized just how much she was about to change. "Are you ready for this?" Dante asked, his eyes locking onto hers. Tasha took a deep breath, her mind made up. Yes, she said, her voice steady. I'm ready. Dante nodded slowly, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Good. Then welcome to the team, Tasha. Things are going to get interesting from here. As they left the room, Tasha couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. She had no idea what was coming next, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life was never going to be the same. The next few days felt like a blur to Tasha. She had stepped into a world that was far beyond anything she had ever imagined. Every decision, every move she made felt like it had a weight she had never experienced before. Dante's offer had shifted something inside her, and now, she was entrenched in his world, a world that wasn't just about serving drinks or delivering food. It was about power, strategy, and decisions that rippled through the city like a storm. The first task Dante gave her was deceptively simple. He handed her a stack of papers, contracts, deals, legal loopholes, and told her to review them, to look for anything that seemed off. It was the kind of thing she could have done 1,000 times in her old life, but now it was different. Now it mattered. She sat at the large oak desk in the corner of his office, a glass of water in front of her, the fluorescent lights overhead casting a harsh glow on the papers before her. Her fingers traced the lines of the first contract. It was long, filled with legal jargon she had never cared to understand before. But now, as she read, she saw patterns that spoke of deception, hidden clauses, and agreements that could ruin someone without them even knowing. She felt a rush of excitement. This was her world now. She could see things others missed. She was starting to understand why Dante had chosen her. Hours passed, and Tasha didn't notice the time slipping by. The office door creaked open, and she looked up to see Dante standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "How are we doing?" he asked, his voice calm. But there was a weight to his words. Tasha set the contract down and met his gaze. "I think I've found something," she said, her voice steady. "These contracts, they're written in a way that leaves too much open to interpretation. It's like they were designed to benefit one side, while trapping the other." Dante raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Go on," he said, stepping into the room. "What do you mean?" Tasha pointed to a clause in one of the documents, a clause that was vague enough to be exploited. "This clause allows the buyer to back out at any time, without consequences, while the seller is bound by all the terms. If the buyer decides to walk away, they don't lose anything. But the seller is stuck with all the costs, even if the deal falls through." Dante nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Good catch," he said. "Most people wouldn't have noticed that. But you're right. This is the kind of thing that can destroy someone without them even knowing what happened." Tasha felt a surge of pride, but she kept her voice even. "It's a smart move," she said. "But it's also a trap. And if someone doesn't catch it, they could lose everything." Dante took a few steps forward, standing next to her desk. "I want you to dig deeper," he said, his tone serious. "Look for more of these traps. I need you to find them before anyone else does. We've got people counting on us." Tasha nodded, feeling the gravity of the task settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just about reading contracts. It was about controlling the outcome, shaping the future, and making sure nothing slipped through the cracks. As Dante left the room, he glanced over his shoulder at her. "You're doing well," he said, his voice softening for a moment. "Keep it up." Those words were all Tasha needed. She dove back into the contracts, her mind working faster now, the pieces of the puzzle starting to come together. As the days passed, Tasha found herself growing more comfortable in her new role. The tasks became more complex, the stakes higher, and the pressure more intense. Dante trusted her now, and that trust was something she couldn't afford to betray. She had never realized how much power could be hidden in a contract, how much could be decided by the fine print, the clauses that no one ever looked at. But now, she was learning, and she was becoming a player in the game. One evening, Dante called her into his office again. This time, there was a different tone in his voice, one that suggested a new challenge was on the horizon. "I've got a meeting with a client tomorrow," he said. "I need you to come with me." Tasha raised an eyebrow. "A meeting? What kind of meeting?" Dante's smile was cold, but there was a hint of something more dangerous behind it. "A meeting with someone who doesn't realize they've made a very big mistake. And I need you to be there, to watch, to learn." Tasha's stomach tightened, but she nodded. "I'll be there," she said. The next day, she found herself standing beside Dante in a sleek, high-rise conference room, looking out over the city. The client, a businessman with a reputation for being ruthless, was seated at the table, his eyes cold as he stared across at Dante. The air in the room was thick with tension, and Tasha could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Dante sat down at the table, his posture relaxed, but his eyes never left the man across from him. "You've been making deals behind my back," Dante said, his voice low but steady. The businessman's face hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "I've always respected our agreement." Dante leaned forward slightly. "You've been trying to cut me out, and now you're going to pay for it." The words hung in the air, heavy and threatening. Tasha watched as Dante's calm demeanor remained unchanged, his confidence unwavering. She had seen him deal with people like this before, but there was something different about today. This wasn't just about business. It was about sending a message. The businessman swallowed, his gaze flickering with uncertainty. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice betraying him. Dante didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached for the contract on the table and slid it toward the man. "Read this," Dante said, "and then we'll talk about how you plan to make it right." Tasha watched closely as the businessman scanned the contract. His face turned pale as he read, and for a moment, he looked as though he might collapse. "This isn't what we agreed on," he said, his voice shaky. Dante didn't flinch. "That's the point," he said, his tone colder now. "You're not in control anymore, and that's something you're going to have to accept." Tasha felt a shiver run down her spine as she realized just how deep Dante's influence ran. This was no longer just about business deals, it was about domination. And she was standing right next to it, learning how the game was truly played. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Tasha continued to dive deeper into the world Dante had introduced her to, working late into the night, analyzing contracts, meetings, and strategies. Every task he gave her was more complex than the last, and she found herself becoming more adept, more confident in her role. But even as she settled into this new reality, a nagging feeling in the back of her mind refused to go away. She had learned the hard way that every decision had consequences, and Dante's world, though exhilarating, was dangerous. One evening, as she sat in her apartment, her phone buzzed with a message from Dante. "Meet me at the office in 30 minutes. We need to discuss something important." Her heart skipped a beat. It had been a few days since their last conversation, and she hadn't heard much from him in between. She wondered what could possibly be so urgent. She grabbed her coat and left her apartment, her mind racing with possibilities. The city seemed different at night, quieter, almost eerie in its stillness. When she arrived at the office, Dante was already there, waiting in the dimly lit conference room. His face was calm, but there was something about his presence that made her uneasy. He motioned for her to sit, and she did, taking a deep breath before meeting his gaze. "I need you to listen carefully, Tasha," he said, his voice calm but firm. "There are things happening in the city that could threaten everything we've worked for. I've been getting word that some of our business partners are getting restless. They're questioning our methods, our deals, and some of them are considering making a move against us." Tasha frowned, her pulse quickening. "What do you mean? Who's making a move?" Dante looked at her, his eyes cold. "There's a faction that's been growing in power, trying to move in on our territory. They think they can take what's ours, but they're wrong. And now, we have to make sure they know it. But I need your help, Tasha." Tasha leaned forward, trying to absorb everything. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the growing tension. Dante's gaze hardened. "I need you to go to a meeting with me tomorrow. We'll be sitting across from people who think they can challenge us. I need you to watch, to listen, and to help me make sure that no one tries to undermine us. Your perspective, your ability to see things that others don't, could be the difference between us walking away victorious and losing everything." Tasha swallowed, her mind racing. This wasn't just about contracts or deals anymore. It was about survival. She had seen what Dante could do to people who crossed him, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to be part of that. But at the same time, there was a part of her that wanted to prove herself, to show Dante, and herself, that she could handle it. "I'm ready," she said, her voice unwavering. Dante's expression softened just slightly. "Good," he said, his voice lowering. "You've come a long way, Tasha. I'm starting to see the potential in you that I knew was there from the start. But this meeting, tomorrow, it's going to be a test. You have to be sharp. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. There's a lot at stake, and one wrong move could cost us everything. Tasha nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle on her shoulders. She knew she wasn't just going to be sitting back and watching this time. She was going to be in the thick of it, helping to shape the outcome. As Dante stood and walked to the door, he paused and turned to her. Tomorrow, Tasha, things are going to change. But how they change is up to us. With that, he walked out of the room, leaving Tasha alone with her thoughts. The next day arrived too quickly. Tasha found herself sitting in the back of a sleek black car, on her way to the meeting with Dante. The car sped through the city, the streets blurring past her as she mentally prepared herself. This wasn't just another task. This was the real deal. She had been thrust into a world of power, of high stakes, and now she was going to see firsthand just how ruthless it could be. As they arrived at the location, a discreet building in the heart of the city's financial district, Tasha could feel the tension in the air. The group they were meeting with had a reputation for being cold, calculating, and dangerous. As they walked into the building, the guards at the door barely glanced at them, allowing them to pass with a silent nod. The room they entered was stark, minimalistic, with a large table in the center surrounded by high-backed chairs. At the table sat a group of men and women, all business, all looking at Dante with sharp eyes. They knew who he was, and they knew what he was capable of. Tasha stood at the back of the room, her eyes scanning the group. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, and she knew this was no ordinary negotiation. This was a showdown. Dante took a seat at the head of the table, his posture calm, his demeanor composed. "I'm glad you could all make it," he said, his voice steady. "But let me make one thing clear. This meeting is not about negotiating. It's about setting the record straight. There are certain things that need to be understood, and I don't intend to waste any more time." The room was silent. The tension was palpable. Tasha watched as the group shifted in their seats, some of them uncomfortable with Dante's directness. She could see the power dynamics at play, the way they all reacted to him. It was clear that Dante was the one in control, and anyone who underestimated him was making a dangerous mistake. "We all know why we're here," Dante continued. "You've been questioning our methods, our business. But I'll tell you this, there's no room for doubt in this world. No one gets to challenge us and walk away unscathed. If you think you can take what's ours, you're gravely mistaken." As the meeting continued, Tasha stayed in the background, observing. She could see the tension rising, the way Dante's words were starting to affect the group. The more he spoke, the more they seemed to shrink back, realizing they were in over their heads. Dante had them where he wanted them, and it was only a matter of time before he made his move. And as Tasha stood there, watching everything unfold, she realized that she was no longer just an observer. She was part of this world now, and her actions, her choices, would shape the future. The tension in the room was thick, and Tasha could feel it in the pit of her stomach. Dante had spent the last hour making his intentions clear, his voice calm, but filled with an authority that left no room for doubt. The group across from him was starting to understand that this wasn't just a simple meeting. This was a power play. The men and women sitting at the table had underestimated him, and now they were realizing that their miscalculations could cost them everything. Tasha stood in the back of the room, her eyes fixed on the scene unfolding in front of her. She had seen Dante in action before, but this was different. There was a new intensity in the way he carried himself, a confidence that sent a chill through the room. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about survival. One of the men at the table, a businessman in his late 50s with a sharp suit and an even sharper demeanor, finally spoke up. "You think you can scare us into submission?" he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're playing a dangerous game, Romano. You don't know who you're dealing with." Dante's expression didn't change. He didn't flinch, didn't show any sign of anger. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing as he studied the man. "No," Dante said, his voice low and steady. "I'm not playing a game. I'm making sure everyone here understands one simple thing. This is my city. If you want to challenge that, be my guest. But understand the consequences." The man's face reddened, but before he could respond, Dante's voice cut through the air like a knife. "But here's the difference between you and me," Dante continued, his eyes flicking briefly to Tasha before returning to the man. "I don't care if you're trying to be a big player. I don't care if you think you're untouchable. You're not, and I'm going to make sure you know that. I don't deal in threats, I deal in action. You can either walk away from this meeting with what little dignity you have left, or you can test me. Your choice." The room fell silent. Dante's words hung in the air, and the atmosphere shifted. The businessman's bravado faded, and the others at the table exchanged uneasy glances. Tasha could see the fear in their eyes now. They had been so confident just moments ago, but now they were realizing the gravity of the situation. One by one, they started to look away, unwilling to meet Dante's gaze. The power dynamics had shifted completely. Dante had them exactly where he wanted them. "I'm giving you one chance to walk away," Dante said, his tone almost conversational now. "I'm not going to waste any more time with people who don't know their place. So what's it going to be?" The room was still, as if everyone was holding their breath. Tasha's heart was racing. She had never seen Dante so in control, so uncompromising. It was a side of him she hadn't fully understood until now. He wasn't just a mafia boss. He was a master manipulator, a strategist who knew how to bend people to his will without even raising his voice. The businessman finally broke the silence, his voice tight. "We'll back off. For now," he said, his pride clearly wounded. Dante smiled, but it was a cold, humorless smile. "Good choice," he said. "I suggest you remember it." With that, the meeting ended. Dante stood, and the others quickly followed suit, their faces showing a mixture of fear and grudging respect. Tasha remained at the back of the room, her mind spinning with everything that had just happened. As the others filed out, Dante turned to her. "Well done, Tasha," he said, his voice low. "You kept your head in there. That's what I need. People who don't fold under pressure." Tasha nodded, but inside, she was still processing everything. She had just witnessed Dante's power in action, and it left her with a sense of awe and a creeping fear. This was the world she had stepped into, and there was no going back now. As she left the room, Dante walked beside her, his expression still unreadable. "You did well," he repeated, his gaze shifting to her. "But this is just the beginning. There's more to come, and I need you to be ready." Tasha didn't respond immediately. Her mind was still reeling from what had just happened. But one thing was clear. Dante wasn't just playing the game. He was changing the rules. And now, she was part of it. She didn't know where this path would lead, but she knew that with every step, she was getting deeper into a world of power, danger, and decisions that could change everything. The question was, would she be able to keep up, or would she get swept away in the chaos? The days after the meeting felt like a whirlwind for Tasha. Dante's words kept echoing in her mind. Asterisk, "You did well. But this is just the beginning." Asterisk, she had been thrust into a world she barely understood, but now, there was no turning back. She had seen what Dante was capable of, how easily he bent people to his will, and how swiftly he could make the most calculated decisions. It was both thrilling and terrifying. But she was beginning to realize something. In this world, weakness was a liability. And now, more than ever, she needed to prove her worth. The next few days, Dante kept her close. She was involved in every decision, every contract, every subtle maneuver that would affect the balance of power in the city. And every day, she was learning more about him, more about the way his mind worked. She had always been quick to pick up on patterns, but Dante's mind? It was a labyrinth. He made connections in ways that left her in awe, and the more she saw, the more she understood why he was at the top. One afternoon, Dante called her into his office. She entered to find him already seated behind his desk, looking over a series of documents. His usual cold demeanor was in place, but there was something about the tension in his shoulders that told Tasha this meeting wasn't like the others. "Close the door," Dante said without looking up, his voice steady. Tasha did as instructed, the soft click of the door closing behind her making the moment feel all the more serious. She took a seat across from him, waiting. "There's a situation I need you to handle," Dante said, finally looking up from the papers. His gaze was sharp, focused. "One of our business partners is thinking of going behind our backs. They're attempting to make deals with the people we've warned them about. It's a betrayal, and it needs to be dealt with quickly." Tasha listened intently, the adrenaline starting to build. She had always been good at reading people, at sensing when something was off, but now, the stakes were higher. She was being trusted with something dangerous. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice calm despite the growing tension. Dante's eyes narrowed, studying her. "I want you to meet with them. I need you to find out who else is involved, how deep this goes. And if they're serious about crossing me, you'll need to make sure they never make that mistake again. Tasha's heart raced. She had been in dangerous situations before, but this was different. She was about to step into a world where there was no room for mistakes, no second chances. She had seen how Dante handled threats, how he eliminated them with ruthless efficiency, but this time, it was on her. Understood, she replied, her voice steady. Dante gave a small nod. Good. I'll make the arrangements. Just don't let them see you coming. You're going in under the radar. Be subtle. I'll handle the rest once you have the information. Tasha stood, ready to face whatever challenge lay ahead. But as she turned to leave, Dante's voice stopped her. Tasha, he called, and she turned back. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. You've proven yourself to me. But this is the real test. Make sure you don't fail. Tasha nodded, the weight of his words settling in. As she left the office, her mind was racing. She had never felt more alive, more determined to succeed. This was her chance to show Dante, and herself, that she could handle whatever came her way. The following evening, Tasha found herself in a dimly lit restaurant, the kind of place where deals were made quietly, behind closed doors. She had studied the documents Dante had given her and had learned everything she could about the partner in question. Now, she was going to meet them face to face. As she entered, her eyes scanned the room, looking for any sign of danger. It wasn't hard to spot him. The man, Michael Turner, was seated at a corner booth, surrounded by his associates. His eyes met hers as she approached, and for a moment, she saw something in them, something calculating, a flicker of recognition. Tasha, he said, his voice smooth as silk. I wasn't expecting you. She smiled politely and took a seat across from him. I'm sure you weren't, she replied, her voice cool. The tension was palpable, but she kept her composure, not letting her nerves show. Michael leaned in slightly, his tone lowering. I assume Dante sent you? She didn't flinch. Dante has many interests. I'm here to ensure everything remains in order. Michael chuckled, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. In order? You know as well as I do that things aren't always as simple as they seem. And when it comes to business, sometimes alliances need to be adjusted. Tasha's smile didn't falter. You're right. But if you're going to adjust your alliances, it's best to do it without stepping on the wrong toes. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly, and Tasha could see the shift in his demeanor. He had been testing her, trying to gauge her reaction. And now he knew. He knew that she wasn't just some waitress. She was someone who could play the game just as well as he could. You're sharp, he said, leaning back in his seat. I'll give you that. But don't think you can intimidate me. I've been in this business too long. Tasha leaned in just a little closer, her voice low. I don't need to intimidate you, Michael. I just need you to understand one thing. She paused, making sure he was hanging on to her every word. Dante's world doesn't have room for mistakes. And you're about to make one. Michael's face went from cocky amusement to something far more serious. He knew the game was over. The door to the back room opened, and Dante stepped inside, flanked by his men. Michael stood up, his face pale now, and Tasha watched as the power dynamics shifted once again. This was Dante's world, and Michael Turner had just learned that the hard way. The room fell into a tense silence as Michael Turner stood before Dante, his face pale with realization. The smug, confident demeanor he had walked in with had vanished, replaced by a sense of vulnerability that Tasha could see clearly. Dante, however, remained unmoved. His expression was as cold as ever, as though nothing out of the ordinary was happening. The change in the room was palpable, and Tasha could feel it in her bones. This was the moment. Michael had made a mistake, and now, he was going to pay the price. You know, Michael, Dante began, his voice smooth, controlled. This could have gone a lot differently. You could have walked away with your pride intact. But you decided to cross a line, and that's something I don't take lightly. Michael swallowed hard, his eyes darting between Dante and the men who stood behind him. I didn't mean to cause any trouble, Dante, he said, his voice shaking slightly. I was just trying to make a deal that would benefit everyone. You know how the game works. Dante's lips curled into a small, humorless smile. I do know how the game works. And that's exactly why you're in trouble. You thought you could play it better than I could. That's where you went wrong. Tasha watched, her heart pounding in her chest. She had seen Dante handle confrontations before, but never like this. There was something different about this one, something personal. The stakes were higher now, and she realized it wasn't just business anymore. This was about loyalty, about respect, and about sending a message. Michael's gaze shifted, his eyes narrowing as he finally met Dante's stare. "You think you can just crush me like this?" he spat, his voice growing more defiant, though the fear was still evident. "You think I'll just bend to your will?" Dante leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him, studying Michael with an almost detached interest. "I don't want you to bend, Michael," Dante said calmly. "I want you to understand your place. You're not the one making the rules here. I am." He paused, letting the words sink in before continuing, his tone darkening. "And if you don't respect that, if you continue to think you can undermine me, then you'll regret it." Michael took a step back, his face now a mixture of frustration and fear. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dante's gaze never wavered. "I want you to know that you made a mistake, and I want you to remember it the next time you think about challenging me. As for what comes next," Dante's voice trailed off, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. "What happens next is simple," Dante continued, his voice quiet but filled with authority. "You walk away from this. You go back to your business, and you never forget who gave you a second chance. Because if you do, if you ever cross me again, there won't be a second time." Michael's chest heaved as he processed Dante's words, the weight of them sinking in. Tasha could see the internal struggle playing out across his face. He knew Dante wasn't bluffing. He had no choice but to agree. "Fine," Michael muttered, his shoulders slumping. "I'll back off. I'll stay out of your way." Dante nodded, the tension in the room easing just a little. "Good," he said. "You've learned your lesson. Now go." Michael didn't hesitate. He turned and walked out of the room, his head low, his pride shattered. As the door closed behind him, the weight of the moment finally seemed to lift. Dante exhaled, his posture relaxing slightly. "That's how it's done, Tasha," he said, turning to her. "We don't play games. We set the rules, and those who try to break them learn the hard way." Tasha stood there, watching him. There was a coldness to his demeanor that still unsettled her, but there was also something else, a quiet strength, a certainty in his every move. She was starting to understand why Dante was so dangerous, why he had earned the respect of everyone around him. "You handled that well," she said, her voice steady. Dante's lips curled into a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I didn't have much of a choice." He was too far gone to be reasoned with. Some people just need to be reminded of their place. Tasha nodded, the weight of his words settling on her shoulders. "And what now?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Now," Dante said, standing up and walking toward the window, "we move forward. The game's always in motion, Tasha. There's no time to waste. I expect you to keep your eyes open. Stay ahead of everyone, and make sure we're always a step ahead of the competition." His words were a command, but they carried an undercurrent of trust. Tasha had proven herself, and now, it was time for her to step up. "I will," she said, determination flooding her chest. Dante looked out over the city, his gaze distant. "Good. We've got more work to do, and I need people I can rely on. You're one of those people now." Tasha didn't respond immediately. She just nodded, her mind already processing everything she had learned. She had come a long way since the first day she had stepped into this world, but she knew this was only the beginning. The decisions she made from here on out would define her. They would define who she was in Dante's world. And there was no turning back now. The next few days unfolded with a sense of unease that Tasha couldn't shake off. She had proven herself to Dante, but now, she felt the weight of her decisions pressing harder than ever. The stakes were higher, the risks more dangerous, and her role in this world was growing by the day. She had seen Dante in action, how effortlessly he handled situations that would break lesser men, and now she was in the center of it all. She couldn't afford to slip, not now. The office was bustling as usual when Tasha entered. She had spent the last few hours reviewing some new contracts, but there was something in the air that told her this day would be different. As she walked into Dante's office, he was already there, standing by the window, looking out over the city. He turned when she entered, his expression unreadable as always. "Tasha," he said, his tone casual, but there was an edge to it. "We need to talk." The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. There was no small talk, no pleasantries. When Dante said, "We need to talk," it was always serious. She nodded, walking toward the desk where he stood. "What's going on?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Dante's eyes flicked to her as he picked up a folder from his desk. "I'm sure you've noticed the change in the atmosphere around here. People are starting to talk, and not in a good way. There's been a shift in the city, Tasha. Rivals are moving in on our territory. It's time for us to remind them who's in control." Tasha's pulse quickened. She had known things were tense, but hearing it from Dante made it all the more real. She had been warned. This was a dangerous game, and mistakes could cost lives. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice firm. Dante looked at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I need you to be sharp, Tasha. We've got a meeting with one of our major partners tomorrow. They've been acting strange lately, and I don't trust them. I want you to go in, find out what they're up to, and get the answers I need. No hesitation. You get one chance to make this right." Tasha felt a cold chill run through her. This was bigger than just business. This was about loyalty. And this time, her loyalty would be tested in a way it hadn't been before. She nodded. "Understood. I'll handle it." Dante paused, his gaze intense. "I know I've put a lot on you, but you're here because I trust you. Don't let me down." There was a weight to his words that left Tasha speechless. She had never felt more like a part of his world than she did right now. But with that came a realization. She had to be willing to do whatever it took. No more second-guessing. No more fear. She had to be willing to step up or risk losing everything. The following evening, Tasha found herself sitting across from the men who controlled one of the largest portions of the city's operations. The air in the room was thick with tension. These men had been allies once, but lately, things had changed. The trust had started to fray, and tonight, it was time for answers. She had prepared herself for this moment, her hands steady, her mind sharp. But even so, there was something different about being in the room with them. These were the men Dante had spoken of, the ones who were starting to feel the heat from the competition. Their confidence was evident, but there was a crack in it, one Tasha could see clearly. As she sat down, the men exchanged quick glances. They were watching her, sizing her up. But Tasha had learned from Dante. She didn't flinch. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm. "You're not acting like yourselves lately. We've been through too much together to let anything mess this up." One of the men, a tall, broad-shouldered figure with a rough, weathered face, spoke up. "You don't know what's coming, do you?" he said, his tone almost mocking. "There's a storm brewing, Tasha, and we've been caught in the middle." Tasha's eyes never left his. "That's why I'm here. I need to know what you're planning. Are you with us, or are you making deals behind our backs?" The man hesitated, his jaw tightening as he studied her. Tasha could see the wheels turning in his head. They hadn't expected her to confront them like this. They hadn't expected someone like her to see through their facade. "You're bold," the man said, finally breaking the silence. "I'll give you that." He leaned back in his chair, the tension in his shoulders slowly easing. "We've been talking to a few other players. Some of them are offering more freedom, more control over our own operations. Dante's been tightening his grip, and it's starting to feel like we're losing out." Tasha felt a flicker of anger rise within her. They were questioning Dante's authority? It was almost laughable, but she kept her face neutral. "And what does that mean for us?" she asked, her voice cool. "Are you willing to risk everything just for a little more power?" The man's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand, Tasha. This isn't just about power. It's about survival. If we don't make a move now, we're going to be swallowed whole. Dante's empire is strong, but it's not invincible." Tasha sat back, processing what he was saying. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about fear. These men were scared, and they were making decisions based on that fear. Dante had built his empire on respect, and these men had forgotten that. They were looking for an easy way out, a way to protect themselves. But in doing so, they were willing to destroy everything Dante had built. And Tasha wasn't going to let that happen. "I think you're making a mistake," she said, her voice steady. "Dante's not just a businessman. He's the reason you're all sitting here in the first place. If you're willing to sell him out now, you're going to regret it. This empire is built on loyalty. If you walk away from that, there's no coming back." The man stared at her, his eyes cold. "We'll see," he said, before standing up and walking toward the door. Tasha stayed in her seat, watching him go, her mind racing. She had done what Dante had asked her to do, but she knew this was far from over. Tomorrow would bring more answers, more decisions, and the consequences would be bigger than anything she had faced before. The power in this room had shifted, and now it was up to her to make sure Dante's world remained intact. This was the moment where everything changed, and she was ready to step up and make her mark. The following days were a blur of meetings, decisions, and the quiet tension that had settled over the city. Tasha had done what Dante asked. She had confronted the men who had been plotting behind his back, and for a moment, it seemed like everything was under control. But as the days wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. Dante had been right about the power shifts in the city, and now it was more important than ever to stay sharp. She knew that the moment of reckoning was approaching. That day came sooner than expected. Dante called her into his office again, his face as calm as ever, but there was a sharpness in his eyes that told her this meeting was different. He motioned for her to sit, his gaze never leaving her. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice steady but laced with an undertone of urgency. "One of the partners we've been working with has decided to play both sides. They've been feeding information to our competitors, trying to stir up trouble. And now, it's reached a point where we have no choice but to act." Tasha felt a chill run down her spine. She had expected challenges, but this was different. This was a betrayal. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante's eyes met hers, and for the first time, there was something almost vulnerable in his gaze. "It's Michael Turner," he said, his words cold. "The man you met last week. He's been playing us, trying to secure a deal with the other side." Tasha felt her stomach tighten. Michael Turner? She had thought he was just a pawn in the game, but now, she realized how wrong she had been. Dante didn't let anyone cross him without consequences. "What do we do now?" she asked, her mind racing. Dante stood up, walking over to the window. "We end it. And we send a message. I want you to go to the meeting tomorrow. Get him to admit what he's done, and then make sure he knows there's no going back. We can't afford to leave any loose ends." Tasha felt the weight of the task settle on her shoulders. She had always known that this world was dangerous, but now, it was personal. Michael had betrayed them, and Dante's empire couldn't afford that kind of weakness. "Understood," she said, her voice steady. "I'll handle it." The next day, Tasha found herself in another meeting room, but this time, the stakes were much higher. Michael Turner was already there, sitting at the table, his face a mask of confidence. But Tasha could see the nervousness behind his eyes. He knew he was cornered. She walked in, her heels clicking on the polished floor. The air in the room was thick with tension as Michael looked up at her. He didn't say anything at first, but his eyes told her everything she needed to know. He was expecting her to make the first move. "You've been busy, Michael," Tasha said, her voice smooth but firm. "Feeding information to the wrong people, trying to play both sides. I'm curious, how did you think that would end?" Michael leaned back in his chair, trying to maintain his composure, but it was clear that his confidence was slipping. "I didn't think you'd find out," he muttered, his tone defensive. "I thought I could manage both deals. There's enough room for everyone to win." Tasha's eyes narrowed. "That's not how this works, Michael. There's no room for everyone when it comes to betrayal. You've crossed a line that you can't come back from." Michael opened his mouth to argue, but Tasha cut him off. "You're playing a dangerous game. And now, you're going to learn what happens when you try to undermine Dante Romano." Michael's face paled, his earlier bravado disappearing. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I thought I could secure something better for myself, that's all." Tasha stepped closer, her gaze fixed on him. "That's the problem with people. Like you, Michael. You think you can outsmart the system, but all you end up doing is digging your own grave." Michael's eyes darted to the door, but Tasha was quick to stop him. "You're not going anywhere. Not until I get what I need." For the next few minutes, Tasha watched as Michael crumbled under the pressure, admitting to everything. His meetings with the competitors, the plans he had made to undermine Dante's empire. She could see the fear in his eyes now, the realization that his fate was sealed. When he was finished, Tasha took a deep breath, stepping back from the table. "You've made your confession," she said. "Now it's time for you to face the consequences." Michael stared at her, his expression a mixture of fear and disbelief. "What's going to happen to me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Tasha's face remained emotionless as she spoke. "You've crossed the wrong people, Michael. You'll pay for your mistake, but not with your life. Dante doesn't work that way. He'll make sure you're out of the game for good. And as for your future, let's just say it's not looking bright." She turned and walked toward the door, her mind already moving on to the next challenge. As she opened the door, she glanced back one last time at Michael, who was sitting there, defeated. "One last thing," she said, her voice cold. "Remember this moment. The next time you think about betraying someone, think about how it feels to have nothing left. Because that's where you'll be." With that, she left the room, the door closing softly behind her. As she walked down the hallway, Tasha could feel the weight of the decision settle on her shoulders. She had done what needed to be done, but it wasn't over yet. There were still more people to deal with, more risks to take. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing. This world was hers now, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. The days after Michael Turner's betrayal passed in a blur of activity, but Tasha could feel the shift in the air. The consequences of his actions had sent ripples through the underworld, and now, the dominoes were starting to fall. Dante had handled Michael, and the message had been made clear: betrayal wouldn't be tolerated. But as Tasha moved through her new life, she couldn't help but notice the dark undertones that lingered. Every decision now felt like it carried the weight of a life. Every word she spoke had the potential to change the course of someone's future. Dante had given her trust, but trust in this world was a dangerous thing. It wasn't long before the next challenge arrived. Dante called her to his office once again, his voice calm, but carrying an undercurrent of urgency. "We've got a new problem," he said as she entered the room. "A bigger one this time." Tasha looked at him, sensing the tension in his voice. "What's going on?" she asked, already bracing herself for what was coming. Dante leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "A rival family has been making moves. They're trying to get into our territory, trying to make alliances where they shouldn't. I've been patient, but now, I'm not going to wait anymore." Tasha listened carefully, her mind working through the possible implications. This wasn't just business as usual. It was a challenge to Dante's authority, and that couldn't be allowed. "What do you need from me?" she asked, her voice steady. "I want you to get close to their operation," Dante said, his gaze unwavering. "Find out who's behind this and report back. I need you to make sure we're 2 steps ahead of them. If they think they can outplay us, they're wrong." Tasha nodded, the weight of the task settling in. She had learned from Dante's methods. This was going to be a game of strategy, of staying 1 step ahead at all costs. She wasn't afraid, but the stakes had never been higher. The next day, Tasha found herself meeting with a contact from one of the rival families. The setting was a discreet cafe, far removed from the eyes of the city's power players. She had made sure to keep her identity hidden, blending in with the crowd, her every move calculated. The contact, a man named Victor, was a mid-level associate in the rival family. He was nervous, looking around as though expecting trouble at every turn. "What's this about?" he asked, his voice low. "You're here because we need to talk," Tasha replied, keeping her tone neutral. "Your family is making a move on territory that belongs to us. I need to know why." Victor shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said quickly, but Tasha could hear the lie in his voice. She leaned in slightly, her eyes narrowing. "Don't play games with me, Victor," she said. "I know your family's been in talks with mine, and I know they're trying to make a deal. So stop wasting my time. Who's behind this?" Victor looked around nervously before leaning closer, his voice barely a whisper. "It's not as simple as you think. There's more at play here than just territory. There's someone bigger pulling the strings. Someone you might not expect." Tasha's mind raced as she absorbed his words. There was someone else involved, someone higher up in the ranks. This was no longer just about rival families. It was a much more intricate web. "Who?" she asked, her voice low but insistent. Victor hesitated, then sighed, clearly weighing the risk of speaking. "I don't know for sure, but I've heard whispers. There's a name, Luca D'Angelo. He's been making moves behind the scenes, gathering allies. I think he's the one pushing for the expansion." Tasha's blood ran cold at the mention of the name. Luca D'Angelo was a name she had heard whispered in the shadows of the criminal world. He was known for his ruthlessness, his ability to manipulate events from behind the scenes. If he was involved, this was no longer a simple territorial dispute. It was a power struggle. "Where can I find him?" Tasha asked, her voice steady. Victor shook his head, looking even more uneasy. "I don't know exactly. He keeps to the shadows. Make sure no one knows his true intentions. But I've heard he's been frequenting a warehouse on the docks. It's a place where deals are made, where the dirty work happens." Tasha stood, a sense of determination settling in. "Thanks for the information," she said, her voice cool. "You did well. But if you're lying to me, I won't forget it." Victor nodded quickly, fear in his eyes. Tasha turned and walked out, her mind already strategizing. Luca D'Angelo was a name to be reckoned with, and now she had to make sure she was prepared for whatever came next. The power shifts in the city were becoming clearer, but they were still fragile. One wrong move, and everything could come crashing down. As she walked through the streets, Tasha couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to face something bigger than she had ever imagined. Luca D'Angelo was no ordinary player in this game. And now, it was up to her to make sure Dante's empire didn't just survive, it thrived. She couldn't afford to fail. Not now. Not after everything she had fought for. Explore the world of passion, intrigue, and loyalty in these thrilling romance stories that combine power, betrayal, and unexpected twists. As Dante navigates the complex world of criminal empires, Tasha finds herself stepping into a life of power and danger, learning that the stakes are much higher than she ever imagined. From hidden alliances to dangerous confrontations, these romance stories keep you on the edge of your seat. The deeper Tasha gets involved with Dante, the more she realizes that every decision carries consequences, both personal and professional. Betrayal threatens everything, but Tasha is determined to prove herself. Will she stay loyal to the powerful man who has shown her trust, or will she be swayed by those who seek to undermine him? These romance stories offer a glimpse into a world where love, power, and betrayal collide. From tense negotiations to the darkest secrets, the journey of these characters is filled with unpredictable twists that will leave you wanting more. The drama unfolds as Tasha tries to navigate the dangers around her, all while her loyalty to Dante is tested in ways she never expected. If you love stories filled with suspense, intense romance, and powerful figures, these romance stories will captivate you from start to finish. Get ready to immerse yourself in a world where trust is earned and loyalty is everything. Don't miss out on the next thrilling chapter in this series of romance stories, where every choice could mean the difference between life and death.